Okay, we're going to start the unit on epistemology, the study of knowledge. So, like I just mentioned, epistemology is one of the main areas of academic philosophy. Episteme is a word for knowledge, and ology is the study of, obviously. It's one of our basic subfields of academic philosophy. Sometimes you'll hear philosophers talking about M&E. Maybe you overhear some of the faculty talking about M&E in the hallway or something like this, or mentioning it to a colleague. And they're talking about metaphysics and epistemology. Other than logic, these are the two most basic areas of academic philosophy where all those realism, anti-realism type debates pop up with regard to ethics, aesthetics, and political values, right? So we could ask about the nature of reality and how we know about what that reality is, and then we can ask about how we have moral knowledge or what moral reality is, and the same of beauty and political values, how we should live together, right? So epistemology is a very important issue. In academic philosophy, we'll see knowledge issues pop up all semester long, but here we're going to address it directly. So again, it's the study of knowledge, one of the main subfields of academic philosophy, and we've already covered some epistemological ideas, including just the basic idea of a belief. We've talked about subjective versus objective truths. We've worried about individual relativism, or all truths relative to the individual. We've talked about the correspondence, or read about the correspondence theory of truth a little bit in that same article from Johnson, where he also mentions epistemic rights, the idea that we're only entitled to believe what we can justify believing, right? So we've already encountered several important epistemological ideas already. If you remember back in the beginning of the semester, in the general introduction, I mentioned Simon Blackburn's idea of philosophy as conceptual engineering, and I mentioned this passage from his book, Think, A Compelling Introduction to Philosophy, where he says, we might wonder whether what we say is objectively true or merely the outcome of our own perspective or our own take on a situation. There's that objective, subjective, universal versus relative issue popping back up again. And then he continues, thinking about this, we confront categories like knowledge, objectivity, truth, and we may want to think about them. And at that point, we're reflecting on concepts and procedures and beliefs that we normally just use. We're looking at the scaffolding of our thought and doing conceptual engineering. So what is the concept of knowledge? We often, excuse me, we implicitly and explicitly make claims to knowing things all the time, but what do we mean by knowledge? It's likely that you maybe haven't thought a whole lot about that one, even though we walk around all the time talking about knowledge, right? So what kind of assumptions are built into our claims there? That would be us doing conceptual engineering in epistemology. And our examination of epistemology is going to fall into three basic topics. First, we're going to look at an issue, one of the main problems, the problem of knowledge and skepticism in what I'm going to call classical or traditional epistemology. Traditional epistemology in Western philosophy has been focused on defining knowledge, understanding what justification requires, and then meeting the skeptical challenge, the notion that we can't have any knowledge whatsoever. So we'll also look at the problems of testimony a little bit later in the semester when it comes to conspiracy theories. Also an issue in epistemology, in traditional epistemology there. And then we're going to look at what we could call virtue and vice epistemology, particularly vice epistemology is what we're going to look at. And this is a topic in contemporary epistemology that focuses on the role personal character traits play in the knower's discovery, conservation, and dissemination of knowledge, or the undermining of those epistemic goals, right? So what kind of character traits play a positive role? Those would be the virtues in gaining knowledge and sharing knowledge, and what kinds of personal character traits undermine the possibility of discovering knowledge? Those would be the vices. Again, we're going to focus on intellectual or epistemic vices in our conversation of that topic there. And then lastly, we'll turn from the topic of personal character traits to issues about social structures related to knowledge. So what kinds of social structures or social networks influence what we know, right, and claim to know, or even how we conceive of knowledge? So there we'll look at epistemic bubbles and echo chambers and worry about whether there are enclosed or open epistemic environments. So this will constitute our introduction to epistemology, again covering a traditional issue and traditional epistemology, classical epistemology, that problem of skepticism, then looking at epistemic vices, intellectual character traits that undermine the pursuit of knowledge, and then also what sorts of social structures like echo chambers might undermine the pursuit of knowledge as well. So with that, we'll turn to our first topic, the problem of skepticism.